Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Beyond the Cage podcast presented by Fight Chicks. I am your host, Jim Gramm. Alongside me is my co-host, the Juice, Dave Sadler, and we're doing a special Christmas edition of Beyond the Cage where we'll just talk a couple of fights, and we'll also give you a quick plug for our end of the year awards show coming up next week, and we're going to talk about Rampage coming back to the UFC. We're also going to talk about Machida versus Dollaway Fight Night, break down those fights, and then we're going to pick the main card of fights for UFC 182, which will be the first card of 2015 on the 3rd of January. Once again, I am Jim Gramm. Alongside me is my co-host, the Juice, Dave Sadler. And how's it going, Dave?
Good. Presents are wrapped. I don't have to work, so holiday season is in full swing. We got a lot to do. The award show is going to be awesome. Sunday, it's going to be got a lot to go over. I got my notes out and everything. So, and hey, check this out, Jim. My wife got me this. See this here?
Yes, candy.
Yeah. You know what this is?
Not I think it kind of looks like Lucky Charms marshmallows.
Dude, it's a whole thing of just the marshmallows from Lucky Charms.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I know that.
Yeah. How cool is that?
That is pretty cool. Like a store sells that, or did she do that herself?
No. Look, she paid $1.98 for it.
I feel like that's worth it.
Yeah.
Because that's probably like 5 boxes worth of marshmallows.
Yeah, it's like $400 worth of Lucky Charms that you have to buy.
Well, just doing a quick plug here for our end of the year show, which will be next week. Will be our last episode of the show. This will be our last normal episode, I guess, if you want to call it. Just breaking down the fights. But we will go over 8 award categories, and these are the categories we're going to have. We kind of tweaked one of them, and we're still going to have. All these will be of the year, so I'm not going to say that for every word. So we have fight, fighter, event, submission, knockout, female fighter, most improved, and then the one we tweaked is now going to be called the Rising Star Award, previously known as the Breakthrough Fighter Award. I think some people were kind of getting last year that confused with the most improved, and I meant for the breakthrough to be, a young guy who hasn't really fought on the big stage, or a gal who hasn't really fought on the big stage, and just recently this year we kind of know who they are. They've had some great performances. Where most improved was supposed to be a guy that had been around for a while, or a gal that had been around for a while and just hadn't really gotten to that upper echelon, but now all of a sudden they're in the top 10, or they're close to getting a title shot, something like that. So we wanted to make sure those 2 awards were different, because last year it felt like we kind of were too interchangeable on that, and I wanted to kind of avoid that this year for the awards in 2014. So those are the awards categories. We're going to have a panel of our friends here in the MMA community that will pick some awards as well with us, and there are a few that won't be able to join us, but they're going to try to send in their picks, so we'll have a lot of variety of different thoughts and opinions, and we're working on a contest for the end of the year awards, whether that's voting on another category, whether that's voting for some of the categories yourself. We're still kind of working out the details, but we'll let you know pretty soon here, and because we got a couple of signed photos I've gotten here over the last couple of weeks that we'll give away to some lucky winners. So,
yeah,
all right.
I've mastered the pronunciation of Uberlandia, and I know how to spell it as well, because I'm going to use that quite a bit.
Uberlandia?
Yeah. Fight Night Uberlandia. And you know what I might do for the greatest news story of the year?
I don't know if that's your own category. That's the category fans will vote in. News story of the year. All right. Well, before we get into Rampage coming back to the UFC, just in case people forgot, because technically UFC 182 is the first card of 2015, because it's January 3rd, even though it's the New Year's Eve card. This card here, this past weekend, the Machida Dollaway card, was the last official card of 2014. So that's another year of our UFC picks, picking every single main card. So the results are in. Dave, you and I both went 6-0 on the main card for Machida and Dollaway. So we got every single fight right.
Boom.
Just in case people were wondering. So, Dave, you finished the year with 134 wins, 96 losses, 1 draw, and 1 no contest. And I end the year at 143 wins, 87 losses, 1 draw, and 1 no contest. So that is how we end here for 2014, which, looking at the numbers we had last year, Dave, there were probably about 30 more fights this year than last year.
Yeah, I'm going to need you to, after the show's over, to split those out, because I want to know, like, how many of those were main event picks that I nailed, because maybe I am missing my calling, and I could just bet the fights and be rich.
Well, I don't know a main event. I don't have like a leisure on that. I just have your overall record. But I mean, you went 103 and 70 last year, and then this year you went 134 and 96. So you're definitely you're in the positive percentage there.
Man, I could be rich.
So
I could get like 2 of these.
Something like that. So our picks will reset for 0 starting with UFC 182, and all this is updated on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Beyond the Cage Podcast, and also probably later this week, right before we do then the end of the year awards, I will update the rankings for January for 2015. There'll probably be a few changes on some of the rankings for January, but some of them will probably be the same. Like, we just updated the women's rankings, so those will probably be the same since we just kind of added those to the rankings. But all right, well, let's get to the news here. Rampage Jackson back in the UFC. At least that's what it looks like. There are also some conflicting reports. We've seen some tweets from Scott Coker himself saying that Rampage, as far as they know, is still under Bellator's contract. And this is the official tweet. It says, "Let us be clear, Quentin Rampage Jackson is under an exclusive contract with #Bellator MMA. We will protect our contractual rights." And that was from Scott Coker on his Twitter account. But the UFC made the announcement during the Machida Dollaway card that he was back. Now I'm getting some information from SheerDog.com. So Jackson left the UFC after losses to Jones, Bader, and Teixeira. Rampage signed with Bellator last year in 2013. Remember, he was supposed to fight Tito Ortiz. That fight got scrapped. He then went into a Bellator tournament where he defeated Joey Beltran and then Christian Mpumbu, and then he fought another tournament winner, King Mo. So he went 3-0 in Bellator. And I think with Ortiz getting a lot of money for that Bonner fight, Rebney out, Scott Coker in, I kind of think a lot of different things for Quentin Rampage Jackson were changing in Bellator. I think at first he was kind of just doing out because he liked Bjorn. He was just having some fun fights. And I know a lot of people like Scott Coker, but for whatever reason, maybe Rampage wasn't feeling the vibes of Scott Coker. And again, I think that Tito thing, getting $300,000 for a fight, whereas Rampage didn't get probably that for any one particular fight in Bellator, maybe kind of soured him. He's like, you know what, let me go back to the UFC. Maybe I didn't have the greatest relationship with Dana White, but at least I know who he is. I know where he's coming from, and I can at least have 1, maybe 2 more fights, and then I can go out and do what I want to do.
Yeah, I don't mind Rampage coming back. I just don't want it to be like he can't beat anybody in the top 15 of the UFC right now. He may be able to knock somebody out, but he doesn't have a better skill set of anybody in the top 15 in my mind. He's coming back for money. There can be fun fights. Go back to like Brian Stan, Wanderlei Silva. Didn't do a whole lot for anybody in the rankings, but it was a great fight, great round. He can do stuff like that. Do they take him to Japan where he was, a part of Pride and give him fights there? Maybe. Does it sell? Probably. But, if he wants to come back to the UFC and, it sells a couple extra fights, gets a few extra buys, I got no problem with it. but don't be disillusioned and think that he's gonna, you know, he's a couple fights away from the title. He's probably like 8 fights away from the title.
No, he's definitely not going to be competing for a title. And again, I think this is him wanting to go out with the UFC, probably more so than anything. And the fight that comes to mind for me is a fight in a rematch against Shogun Rua, which is a fight fans have been wanting for pretty much since both guys entered the UFC, was to see these two go at it again, especially once Rampage was able to capture the UFC light heavyweight championship, beating Chuck Liddell. I think that was a fight a lot of people wanted to see, and that fight happened all the way back in 2005, where Shogun won officially with soccer kicks in the first round. So this would be a fight about 10 years kind of in the making for Rampage to get another shot at Shogun Rua. And, I kind of joked around, Dave, that Shogun versus Rampage, the loser has to retire. I was kind of joking around with that, kind of like a pink slip match in WWE. Now, I don't think it would be that drastic. The loser would have to retire, but that's kind of the vibe, though. Whoever would lose that fight, you would go, well, they definitely have to retire. You can kind of look at it that way, and to me, that should be the first fight and hopefully the only fight we see Rampage in. I don't really see him in that many more matchups. There's not that many other guys I would care to see him take on, because like you said, he's a lot of the guys in the top 10 he's already fought and he's probably already lost to, or he beat several years ago. I mean, he already lost to John Jones. He already lost to Rashad Evans. I don't think he could beat Gustafsson at this stage in his career. He already lost to Glover Teixeira.
Can't beat Cormier.
Definitely can't beat Cormier. Rampage, maybe. He might have a puncher's chance just because, Rampage is pretty much just going to box with them. So that could be intriguing. He already beat Dan Henderson once, and Dan Henderson's probably going to leave the division. And then you have the Shogun fight.
Yeah.
And he already fought Ryan Bader, and he's not going to fight Bader again. I still think he can beat Bader. I don't think he really showed up on that card a couple years ago when he fought Bader. But I don't think that's like a real attractive matchup. Maybe OSP, a young guy, but so that's a possible like 2 matchups of the top guys.
Yeah.
So
unless they got something in the works, I don't know.
And then we also still got to figure. Scott Coker saying he's still under contract. The UFC saying he's back in the UFC. So to me, there's still stuff that got to work out before we even get to booking a fight. Something has to give. Rampage is saying that he bought himself out, but Coker's saying that hasn't happened yet. So I'm not sure.
I just have a hard time believing that the lawyers and whatnot at Zuffa would allow that to happen, allow themselves to sign somebody under contract with somebody else. I mean, there's got to be like hoops and stuff they got to jump through. I just find that hard to believe that that could happen.
I don't know, didn't they announce they signed Eddie Alvarez and then they went through all that lawyer stuff before they eventually got him how many months later?
Yeah.
So this would be the first time. And if you're Scott Coker, who most of the MMA community would consider a stand-up guy, why would you send that tweet if you're lying? What would that do for you if it then finds out that everything was clear and that he was in the UFC and he was lying? What that does not do good for him. So why would he come out and lie? That's what I'm getting at. Why would he send that tweet then if things were all shored up and he was leaving the organization?
Absolutely.
So that makes me lead to believe something still has to happen. Because, like you said, if it comes out he's going back to the UFC, then Scott Coker, I think, maybe lost some
street cred.
Some respect that he maybe had, because Dana White always respected Scott Coker. You pull something like this, not as friendly. Now, again, they're still competing gentlemen. They're still competing against each other, so you can only be so cordial. But I wonder if he found out that he is lying, that this was already a done deal, and he's just trying to get, he's just mad that he's losing Rampage Jackson. I wonder if that will change Dana White's view towards Bellator, kind of like what he had towards Bjorn.
Right.
I don't know. That could be a bad thing for Bellator.
Yeah, Yeah, weird situation. It's a weird situation, and it makes it a little more. What's the word I'm looking for? It makes it a little strange with me because it is Rampage. It's not like they're bringing in like like Joe Warren or like one of these, not even Joe Warren, like a Pat Curran, one of these guys that people think is one of the top guys in the world outside of the UFC. It's for somebody who already left on bad terms, which is what makes it, all that more weird, I guess.
All right, well, let's get to UFC Fight Night Machida versus Dollaway. 6 fights were on the main card. The first fight of the evening was in the middleweight division, and that was Daniel Sarafian, the former Ultimate Fighter contestant for Brazil. He fought in this one. He got the win. It was a rather unfortunate victory because it happened due to injury, as his opponent, Antonio Dos Santos, in the second round, kind of as both guys were throwing some strikes in the pocket, exited, motioned to the ref that something was wrong with his hand. It looked as though Dos Santos popped his finger back in place. It looked as though he had a dislocated finger, but referee Eduardo Herdy already saw that the guy called time, and I guess if a fighter calls time due to an injury and not an illegal foul, the fight then has to be canceled. You can't call timeout, basically, and the fight had to be canceled. It goes down as a knockout victory for Sarafian, and I want to bring this up because if he had a dislocation injury and it stops at that point in time, and then the fight has to get canceled, I think that might have to be changed. Because let's say you're playing football, right? They deem you hurt or whatever, you got to sit off for a play or two. As long as you're fine, you can come back in the game.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much every sport. You could come. I think baseball's the only one. If you get hurt, they have to officially take you out. The same thing as soccer. But all the other sports, you could pretty much come back in later on if you're free. So Dos Santos says, "Hey, my finger's dislocated." I think in that point in time, the doctor should come over and be like, all right, it's dislocated. Either I can't pop it in here, the fight has to stop, or I can pop it back in, and if you feel all right, then you can continue. Those should be the options. It shouldn't only be, oh, you stop the fight, it can no longer continue. Because he seemed like he was still going to fight.
Yeah. Have you ever dislocated your finger or anything, or broke it or anything?
I have not. I'm sure it's painful, and I probably wouldn't still be fighting, but I'm not,
I've never had it happen to me either, but my worry or concern is if I dislocate my finger and I put it back, I'm just speculating, but the chances of it happening again are probably pretty high, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, and
I mean,
it also goes...
They can't keep, oh, I punch you, ow, ow, ow. Fix it, and then punch it. Ow! I did it again. They can't keep doing that. So maybe
but you give him like a one-time pass. You know what I mean? Like, all right, hey, he says he's good to go. If it happens, you could be like, hey, if it happens again, I have to stop the fight.
Well, it's weird that fight got stopped. Remember UFC 175 prelims? Uriah Hall's his toe was sticking out, and they let him fight 2 more rounds with it. Remember that?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, and that was probably way worse than what happened to Antonio in this card.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing is that fight was pretty awesome up to that point.
That's another reason. It's not like it was boring or Dos Santos was probably going to lose. It wasn't like it was a one-sided affair and it didn't matter. But I think that rule, and that's probably a unified thing, but I think that has to be something to be looked at. Is it just seems like it's unfortunate a lot of times it's like anything that stops the fight, that means the fight then has to end. It's like there's no way it can continue a lot of these times unless if it's not on an illegal foul, and I think that has to be changed.
I agree.
Like you said, they can't keep on, oh, my finger's dislocated, just pop it back in. Like if that happens 5 times, yeah, that's ridiculous. But for one time to be like, hey, I just need to pop it back in real quick or something in that instance, I think it should be considered for the fight to continue. But if because it seemed like it was already stopped before the doctor even came in. The doctor coming in at the end was not irrelevant, but irrelevant to the fight continuing, I should say.
Yeah.
Like, it wouldn't have had anything because the referee already deemed, like, you called timeout. So.
I mean, yeah. I don't know if it was even as much as it's just because he called timeout. He personally called timeout. I wonder if that's it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, the fighter called time, so I guess by the rules of him saying, hey, stop it, that automatically means the fight's over.
Right.
And in most cases, if it's a guy's hurt, then yeah, that makes sense. I see why that rule's in place. But in this, it should be take a little more basis by basis.
Most def.
Because he seemed, like you said, the Uriah Hall, and how many fighters have broken their hands and continue to fight? They just didn't simply say anything. Had they said something, the fight would have been stopped, right? Because they wouldn't have allowed them to continue with a broken hand.
Yeah, John Jones.
I mean, that Uriah Faber fight against Mike Brown, the second one.
Yeah.
So.
Hey, speaking of Mike Brown, have you seen this? Have you seen this new show with The Rock? This Wake Up Call?
Yes, sir. I saw the MMA one, if that's what you're referring to.
Am I the only one who laughed when The Rock? Am I the only one who laughed when The Rock said he was at American Top Team and they got nothing but killers here? And he said two people I've never heard of and Mike Brown.
No, I think he said good people.
I don't know who the first two were, but I was like,
I'd have to rewatch what he said,
Yeah.
but he said all the good guys were there. I mean, they showed Teixeira and Lawler and Poirier and Tisha Torres and yes,
Yeah.
Mike Brown.
well, no, it was,
I think he said Thiago Alves.
yeah, it was at the beginning. I think he said Thiago Alves, like two people I'd never heard of, and Mike Brown at the beginning of this episode. He's like, they got nothing but killers here. And then, of course, they come back later, and all those guys are there. But at first, I'm like, say what? I'm a big Rock fan, but I was like, you need to look at the other side of the roster.
I also think Hector Lombard trains there too.
Yeah. No, but good show. I watched 2 episodes last night. So
Yeah, the MMA one was good. And if we get an interview with any from there, we'll have to ask them about how filming was and everything there.
Mhm.
So, all right. So that was a greater issue there than the fight. But next fight in the welterweight division, Eric Silva against Mike Rhodes. Once again, Eric Silva takes on opponent not in the top 15, and he finishes them and looks impressive. I feel bad for Mike Biggie Rhodes. He's taken on nothing but great competition since coming into the UFC, has not beat any of them. And for Eric Silva, once again, it's like he just kind of like Michael Bisping in a sense. Whenever he faces someone, maybe at his level or a little above, he fails. But when he faces someone, slightly below him, he dominates them.
Yeah.
So Eric Silva's in a very interesting position. It's easy to go, oh, he beat Mike Rhodes, he finished in the first round, he has to get someone good. But anytime he takes on someone good, it seems like he loses. So I'm not really sure who's next for Eric Silva, to be quite honest.
Yeah. I talked about that with some friends. Who he gets, I have no idea. Your guess is as good as mine. CM Punk, Rampage, I don't know.
Somebody. It'll probably be someone we've never heard of. That's my guess. Give him another guy to submit in the first round.
Yeah. That's welterweight, right?
Yes.
Would you have been opposed to Magny Silva?
I can get down with that.
Yeah, instead they gave Magny somebody I've never heard of.
Right. I threw out someone in the top 10 like Damian Maia, and then someone's like, Maia's hurt, and I was like, well, it didn't have to be Damian Maia, but somebody we've heard of, and I think he got the Japanese fighter Kunimoto.
Yeah.
And I was like, Kunimoto's a solid fighter, but when you've won 5 fights in a row, you shouldn't be taking on a guy like Kunimoto who no one's ever heard of. You got to take on somebody in the top 15 that people have heard of.
Yes, sir.
I feel he's kind of getting disrespected a little bit.
We'll see what happens.
But because Kunimoto had to be the first name they threw on him, and Magny must have just said yes. He didn't argue or anything. And that's kind of part on him, too. Because he said, you know what, Kunimoto's a great opponent, but Joe Silva, I've won 5 fights in a row. I got to have somebody in the top 15.
Right. And sometimes that's what needs to be said, but it's not what's said. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, if Neil
you gotta,
Magny went 3-2 of those 5 fights, yeah, fight Kunimoto. That's no problem. But he went 5-0. It's never been done before, and now he's taking on a guy that I wouldn't even consider in the top 30.
right. You
Uh,
sometimes you have to let your work do the talking in the cage, but when it comes down to it, you got to stick up for yourself a little bit and be like, hey, I'll fight this no name, but we better be on pay-per-view, or you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
stick up for yourself a little
where's
bit.
Dong Hung Kim, John
Right.
Hathaway,
I'll go
you
to
know, Jake Ellenberger, even though he's on a loss, somebody.
right.
All right. Well, next fight, lightweight division, Rashid Magomedov against Elias Silvario. Very good fight, Dave. Two of the up-and-coming guys here in this division, but it just seemed that Silvario, whatever he was throwing, Magomedov was able to counter and counter with more shots. As these are the outstriking numbers, he outstruck Silvario 102-57, and he outstruck him in every single round. The only round that the closest round was the first, where it was 30-22, but Magomedov also landed a takedown in that round. And then in the third round, Dave, you kind of hear Brian Stand about a minute before this fight ends goes, Magomedov definitely won this fight. He was pretty impressive, but, he was a little slow. He could have maybe picked up the pace a little more, and maybe he could have got a finish to really go in there and make a statement. Something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing, of course. And then what does Magomedov do about 5 seconds after that? Land a huge straight left, knocks down Silvario, and then throws a barrage of punches that gets the finish just 3 seconds before the bell. And he does exactly what Brian Stand wanted him to do, get a finish and make a statement. And he takes what was, just kind of a technical fight and, would have been a nice 3-round decision into a finish, and a guy that, you can't sleep on, a guy that can finish the fight at any point in time, and you can't kind of let your guard down.
Yeah. Sugar Rashid Magomedov did pretty good. That's what I'm going to call him, Sugar Rashid. Um, like you said when you're paraphrasing Stan, it was a very technical kind of like workmanlike approach when he was in the cage. I felt like he dominated and was going to win 30-27, but making a statement like that and showing that you're always going to try to finish up until the last second, I think that's going to bode well for future bookings for that young man. That fight was the latest lightweight stoppage ever.
That's definitely one of the latest stoppages in a 3-round fight. Very, very intriguing. One thing I wanted to say when I was watching that fight, I know Darren wants KJ Noons next. We just talked to him, our friend Darren Cruikshank. But I'd love to see Darren against this Magomedov.
Could be a good fight.
I think that'd be fun.
Good test of skills for both guys.
But like I said, I think he wants KJ, and I think that's what's going to be next.
Yeah.
Next fight, we'll kind of gloss over because it's rather straightforward. Patrick Cummings took on Antonio Carlos Jr., and Patrick Cummings did what he does best, take the fight to the ground and land some pretty nasty ground and pound. I got to give Carlos Jr. credit for not, getting knocked out, but when you get taken down 4 times and you get outstruck 122-14, you're not going to win a lot of fights.
Nope. No, sir. Pretty workmanlike performance again. Patrick Cummings, he was one of those guys that a lot of people forget. Yeah, he came in to fight Cormier, but that was a last-second replacement, and Cummings isn't even in the same ballpark as Cormier. But they've worked to him. They've put him back on like prelims and stuff, and they've worked him up to where he's a solid guy. He's a real solid guy. And when he gets in there, he brings his lunch pail in and he goes to work. So, he may be inching closer to that top 15, top 20. So, see what happens.
Co-main event of the evening, Renan Barão, the former UFC bantamweight champion, against Mitch Gagnon. And if you look at the striking numbers, Dave, Mitch Gagnon, a guy not known for his striking, obviously most would think that he has inferior skills to Renan Barão, which I still would agree with, held his own in the striking department as he actually outstruck Renan Barão 66-64 and was actually the more accurate striker, as Gagnon was 66 of 119 and Barão was 64 of 143. And looking at significant strikes, Renan Barão just had one more significant strike, 59-58. So actually, if you just look at the striking numbers, Gagnon was a lot better at striking than I think a lot of people gave him credit for. Now, that's not to say he still didn't get tagged or I still wasn't at a disadvantage. He was just able, I think, to land some shots in the pocket that maybe Barão wasn't expecting. And I think that the fact there's not a lot of footage of him doing a lot of stand-up, I think, helped. But at the end of the day, Barão was definitely the faster striker than the two. And striking-wise, that was kind of the big difference there. And then when he kind of got tagged with some of those leg kicks and punches, we definitely saw Gagnon try to get the fight to his domain, the grappling. But by the time he really tried to push Dave, which was rounds 2 and 3, he was already kind of tired and beat up a little bit, and Barão has never been taken down before, and, a guy that, again, great grappler, but not necessarily a great takedown guy, couldn't do much as he was 0 for 7 on takedowns, and he was 0 for 2 in round 2 and then 0 for 4 in the third round. And kind of with that, it kind of stifled Barão a little bit in terms of not allowing him to get off on his full striking. But then Barão kind of realized, all right, he's just going to tie me up. Why don't I take him down? And then third round, Barão took Gagnon down 2 of 3 times, and that last one led to the submission arm triangle choke, which he was able to do kind of beautifully. And it was nice because he kind of had him down already up against the cage, didn't like the position. He backed away, got more to the center of the cage, took him down again, and that's when he worked in the arm triangle choke. So it was a nice bounce-back win, nice bounce-back performance by Renan Barão, but I definitely got to give credit to Mitch Gagnon. He's never fought anyone that good in his whole entire career. He hung tough. He did the best that he could do with his skill set, and I definitely got to give him credit for taking this fight, and I think he did a lot better than I thought he was going to do.
I think he did a lot better than a lot of people thought he was going to do. This was a fight that is tricky for Renan Barão because he hasn't had the best year. Obviously, he undefeated for like 400 years. Comes back, gets beat in a pretty shocking fashion by Dillashaw, gets a rematch, comes back, and can't make weight. Dana's like, oh, he's nothing, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. Then they give him this fight, successfully makes weight, and arguably if he wins, he could be next in line for a title shot, maybe. So there was a lot of pressure on him. And it might not have been the most dominant performance we're used to seeing, but he came back, he won the fight, he got the finish. He was well under, the weight limit where he needed to be. So for all intents and purposes, Renan Barão's back, which, it's always good to have a long list of competitors for that belt. And like you said, I think Mitch Gagnon's stock rose in that fight.
Now, with the UFC seemingly moving forward with Dillashaw Cruz, does that mean we see Barão Assunção for the winner of that going to fight the winner of Cruz and Dillashaw?
I could definitely be on board with that. Yes, sir.
And I know it sucks for Assunção because he beat Dillashaw. He should already be getting his shot. But I think if you're Assunção, if you're offered Renan Barão, who was just the champion, to me that fight's just as big as taking on Dillashaw or Cruz. So I got to believe his camp would agree to that.
Yeah, it'd be nice if they could put him on the same card. So if we run into any issues, at least you have actual number one contender type guys to throw in.
And looking at the timeline, that would work because Assunção fought Brian Caraway, that was a couple months ago already, right?
Yeah.
So he would be good to go. Barão, if he could, now they were trying to get Cruz Dillashaw in March. Is kind of what I've been hearing? It hasn't been confirmed, but I heard that's when the rumblings in terms of a month.
Right. Well, Cruz
So
didn't take any damage, and I don't think Dillashaw's hurt.
no, it was just a 5 round. Well, yeah, it went 5 rounds.
Yeah.
So he should be recovered now. That was back in August, right, or September?
Are you talking Dillashaw?
Yeah, when he fought Joe Soto on the replacement.
Yeah, it
That was a
was.
couple months ago, so he
Yeah.
should be fine. So I mean, March is another 3 months. He'll be good to go. So that's what I mean. You could have it on the same card. I don't know if that would headline a pay-per-view if they wanted to do that, just because maybe buy numbers might be low. But could you imagine that as a Fox card? Have the bantamweight title and then the co-main event be for the #1 contendership right after.
Yeah. I like it. I like it. I like it.
All right, well, let's get to the main events of the evening, the card that was dubbed these two fighters' name, Dollaway and Machida. And Dave, I've mentioned the Santa Fe lean before, and we've seen it before, but boy, talk about giving someone the Santa Fe lean. I mean, that body kick on CB Dollaway, man, he was leaning all over the place, and very quick early in the fight, Machida went, and, he got the finish, and man, yeah, that's what I think you strive to do as a fighter. If you can give your opponent the Santa Fe lean, chances are you're going to win. Very, very rarely do you see that happen, and then that guy lose. In this case, it would have been Machida, but yeah, just man, awfully impressive. And it's kind of like, all right, who's next? When can he get back in there, fight another guy? Well, I guess technically Dollaway was in the top 10, but to me, a real top 10 guy, and get back to a middleweight title shot.
Yeah, the most poignant part of the broadcast was the audio of the kick. Did you hear that part?
Yes.
Ouch. That was that made me hurt. But I don't know if that made me hurt more because I had just got done Christmas shopping and I was ready to go to bed, or if that actually hurt. But I digress. There's fights that I want to see at the middleweight division, and the UFC's currently got Machida ranked 4. There's a lot of fights that could happen, but none of the ones I want to see Machida fight. Like, I think they're talking about Machida Rockhold is what I've seen.
And that probably seems the most likely, with Vitor already scheduled to take on Weidman. And I heard rumors of a proposed #1 contenders fight between Jacare and Yoel Romero.
Yeah, like, I mean, I guess I could get with the Romero one. I don't know. I don't think that Lyoto can beat Chris, and I don't think that Lyoto can beat. I don't think he would fight Vitor. So it's like, I don't know. Do you think Lyoto can win the belt and defend it a couple times, or no?
I think he can win the belt. I don't know if he could defend it a couple times.
All right. I mean, don't get me wrong. Very impressive performance, and I was excited to see him when I saw him at 175. He's one of the best fighters that the UFC's ever had. But I don't know. I don't want to keep saying this, but the time is now.
All right, well, speaking of the time is now, let's get to UFC 182, the main card on pay-per-view, January 3rd, 2015, from Las Vegas.
Hey, Jim, are you going to order this at home?
I will be watching it at home.
If you go to fathomevents.com, they have movie theaters that show some of the big pay-per-views. And you can even type in your zip code. I typed in your zip code. And there's a couple.
Yes, I've done that before. Actually, I did that before it was through like a company like that, Fathom, or I think there's another one that does it. And
what's that like?
No, the movie. No, it was funny because the movie theater, like they did it, like you paid like a normal movie ticket. You sat in the movie theater and you watched the pay-per-view on the screen. They also did it for the wrestling ones, and then somehow the WWE and the UFC found out that this company was doing that and obviously making a lot of money because they were paying one pay-per-view fee, $50, and then charging even 100 people at $7. That's $700. That means they made $650 off that, and the UFC and the WWE is not getting any money of that. And that's when we saw this company Fathom come in and do it so the UFC can get their cut of the money. So for a while there, they weren't doing it, but now that they have a third party so the UFC could get their cut, they're now doing it again. So the movie theaters are making a lot less money than they were before, now that they were caught at doing that. And
Would you recommend that for our viewers to go check it out or no?
I think it's fun. It is cool. The good thing, obviously, is you're paying less to see a pay-per-view. You're paying the cost of a movie ticket to go see a pay-per-view, and there's concessions and whatnot. But if you like pausing stuff, if you like rewinding, fast-forwarding, if you're like, oh, I got to go to the bathroom break, if you like having, like a big meal around it, whether that be wings or pizza or burgers or hot dogs or something, you can't really do that. You can't, I got to run to the kitchen real quick. It kind of depends how you like. But if you go to a bar for a lot of fights and you're not home anyway, then this might even be better because you're going to hear all the audio. You don't have to worry about crazy drunk people. Well, as many crazy drunk people. But I definitely would recommend it. I think it is a good time.
Cool. And I know this is a weird question, but are the lights on?
No, it's like a regular movie.
Oh, I mean, because when I go to, if I don't go to that place with the wings and the buffalo, I don't go there because they outlawed the UFC around here. But I like to talk to who you see somebody wearing a tap out shirt. Clearly, they're a big fan, so I like to go talk to people. But I just didn't know, is that environment's not conducive for conversations, about the fights and stuff.
Well, you will get more talking during that than a regular movie.
Right.
Because it's not a movie.
I would be texting just to go against everything that video says at the beginning of a movie.
Yeah, it's definitely a different atmosphere.
That's cool. I might check it out because I'm off.
I think it's like I said, it's like the bar, like in terms of you're not being home, but it's not because you got better comfortable seats, you got a bigger screen to watch on, you can actually hear the audio. Most of the time, the bar either has the audio and it's very low, or because a lot of people are talking, you can't hear it, or they just don't even have it on anyway and they just play their music. So
right.
It's definitely cool. And then obviously at the movie theaters, close to your house as opposed to the bar. It's all kind of personal preference, but I like watching them here at home. But if a friend, suggests, hey, let's get a group of people, let's go down, I wouldn't be opposed to that. It's just typically with my work schedule, I'm working up until the fight, and so I live pretty close to where I work, so I shoot home, turn it on, and I'm good to go. I don't want to then go then to the movie theater. All right, now I got to pay. Hopefully, I get a good seat. For me, typically, I don't have if I had the day off and I had the whole day to kind of do whatever I got to do, maybe I'd be more inclined to do something like that.
Well, just before we get into the breakdown, for the people who are listening, if you go, it's Monday morning right now. If you go on UFC.com, the very top banner on the website is has the link. You can just click it right there. It'll take you, and you can type in your zip code, and you can go check it out if you want at the movie theater. I was looking at the page and I figured I don't know what this is, so I trying to enlighten the fans, Jim. That's all I'm trying to do.
All right, well, let's look at this main card, UFC 182, first fight of the evening in the welterweight division. Hector Lombard against Josh Burkman. Josh Burkman, 5-5 in the UFC, but he has not fought for the organization since 2008, where he lost to Pete Sell, right there where you're at, Dave, in Chicago at UFC 90. He fought in the World Series of Fighting amongst some other promotions, but World Series of Fighting most recently. And of his 27 career victories, 10 are by submission. Hector Lombard, 3-2 in the UFC, 2-0 since moving down to welterweight. His last fight was a victory over Jake Shields at 171, and 19 of his 34 victories are by knockout. Now, Josh Burkman, kind of a journeyman, but of late has looked really good. The only thing I don't like about Josh Burkman, he was hinting that he purposely lost to Steve Carl to try to get out of his World Series of Fighting contract, because if he would have won the belt, he would have had more fights he would have had to take in instead of just the one, which he won after very quickly. So I don't like that. I know maybe that was good for him to do that, to not fight for World Series of Fighting, but I don't like a guy purposely losing. I'm not saying he's going to purposely lose against Hector Lombard. I don't know. That's kind of like point shaving, and so that's kind of sickens my stomach kind of when you hear that.
Yeah.
And that's kind of Now I know he has admitted, but that's kind of what to me what Nate Diaz did against Dos Anjos.
Right. Well, what I would like to know is I'd like to know the context of the question that was asked of Berkman because you know it it could be misconstrued because yeah, basically losing is the best thing that could have happened to him. But sometimes that can get misconstrued between people.
Well,
You,
I
you,
don't know. I haven't heard. I just read the quote. I didn't hear how he said it, so I don't know if he was joking. Like, yeah, I lost that one to get out. Now, I don't know how he said it. That to me is, I guess, the bigger deal is how he, like you said, how he said it. But nevertheless, he put it out there, and,
correct.
and I don't even think that's something you should joke about.
When it comes to this fight, Jim, do you think that Hector Lombard, we have him? I don't have our rank
I thought we
up
had him
there.
like 6.
Yeah, the UFC has him at 6 as well. I don't
Okay,
have
we,
ours up.
we we have him probably somewhere around there. It's probably not much different.
Do you think he needs a finish in this fight?
No,
You don't think he needs one?
no, I don't think so. Because obviously Rory McDonald's ahead of him, win or lose, and obviously if they're going to go ahead with the three-peat, he's going to have to wait. So to me, it doesn't really matter what he does as long as he wins.
Well, I guess I'm not saying he's going to get a title shot in the next 2 fights, but he had a very dominant performance against in his last fight against
Jake
Shield.
Shields, right?
I mean, he stifled a pretty good grappler, and he showed those skills. And all we've ever heard of Hector Lombard is he's a killer. He's got crazy kicks, crazy punches, all that kind of stuff, crazy power, and we haven't necessarily seen it at the UFC. He's been victorious in his fights in the UFC. I just think that against somebody like Berkman, that's not a household name. If he can go out there and finish, he kind of cements himself that he is top 5. And yeah, he might not get Lawler, or Hendricks or McDonald or any of those guys, but he's definitely in that conversation. If he goes out and just 3-round decisions, Berkman, I think that you're gonna hear it from all the experts that this isn't the real Hector Lombard. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but Josh Berkman's a tough guy.
Right.
It's not like he's taking on somebody that's. I mean, Josh Berkman's been finished. I'm not going to go about that, but Berkman's a pretty tough guy. He's a solid competitor. I think a lot of people, before the fight against Steve Carl, I think because he beat John Fitch, had him in the top 10, if not slightly outside of it. So he's taking on a guy I would consider top 20. So he's not taking on a slouch. He's taking on a guy that UFC fans may not remember just because it's been 6 years, but he's still taking on a tough competitor, and I wouldn't hold it against him if he didn't finish Josh Berkman because he's still probably going to have to fight the winner of Gastelum Woodley or fight Rory McDonald before he gets a title shot.
I agree.
And to me, if he's dominant like he did against Jake Shields, where it's clearly he's battering his opponent, it's just somehow his opponent stays, not knocked out. I don't know how much you can really hold that against him. I know people might have been on him for the Shields thing, but a lot of people would have been knocked out. How Jake Shields survived, I don't know. So to me, I don't know how much you can hold that against Hector Lombard.
Hey, what do you think about Lombard if he were to be victorious? What do you think about him fighting the winner of Matt Brown, Tarek Saffiedine?
Well, I'd be more intrigued if it's Matt Brown, just because of his style. Now, not say I wouldn't want to see him against Saffiedine, but I think if Matt Brown wins, yeah, I'd be more on board. But if Saffiedine wins, like I said, I think the winner of Woodley Gastelum or Rory McDonald, I think, would be more likely. Just because technically those guys would, I guess, be ahead of him.
It'll be interesting when we break down the fights. It'll be interesting to see what we think about who he should fight. Kind of depending on, I mean, if he walks out there and just batters Berkman for a round and wins the fight, I wonder how that might change our opinion on, on if he should fight Saffiedine or Rory McDonald.
But no, it should be fun. I think Josh Berkman has a chance in this fight, but he has to be active. He has to be in and out. He cannot stand and kind of plod along, because that's Hector Lombard's pace, and he's probably going to knock you out.
Yep.
And I wouldn't try to take Lombard down because, people talk about Ronda Rousey. Well, he has some good judo too, Hector Lombard. So if you go in and shoot, he'll switch his hips, and you'll be on your back. I don't know if you can take this guy down. So there's that too. So it should be fun. The next fight, I think I'm probably the most excited to see this fight here, Dave, because of this young gentleman here, Kichi Horiguchi, taking on Luis Godinez at flyweight. Horiguchi 3-0 so far in the UFC, riding an overall 8-fight winning streak. His last fight, he beat John Delos Reyes back at the Hunt Nelson card, and 9 of his 14 career victories are by knockout, which is very impressive for a flyweight division that doesn't have that many knockouts. Godinez 1-2 in the UFC with a no contest. This last fight was that no contest against Phil Harris. That was back at the Fight Night in London earlier this year in March, and 4 of his 6 career victories are by finish, 2 knockouts, 2 submissions. Now, since the Ultimate Fighter, Dave, Godinez kind of came out. He had a victory, but he's kind of been hurt. He hasn't had that many fights. He's lost 2 of those fights. Not as relevant as he was a couple years ago when the division opened up. I still think he's exciting and talented, but Horiguchi's kind of the new hot prospect here in this division, and this is kind of his chance to showcase his skills on a main card against a somewhat known opponent, and a chance for him to really break through in this division and put himself ever closer to that title shot. And I'm just really excited to see Horiguchi, because I think he is the next big thing, the next, I guess you could say the small thing, right? Because it's flyweight. He's the next small thing for this division.
Yeah. No, I'm not always liking to agree with you, but in this one, it's hard not to agree with you. Godinez's one of those where I don't think he's a gatekeeper, but he's one of those guys who's been there since the beginning of the division. So if you can beat a guy like this, it kind of cements your spot that, oh yeah, this guy's he's not just ranked 13, 14, or 15 because there's only 18 guys in the division, like this guy's legit. So this is definitely a fight, should be a fun fight, but it's definitely a fight that, a win for Horiguchi can give him a huge bump up in the rankings and, get him closer to that ever-desired title shot.
Next fight of the evening in the middleweight division, Brad Tavares against Nate Marquardt. Tavares is 7-3 in the UFC. His last fight was a loss to Tim Boesch at the Bangor, Maine Fight Night, and 6 of his 12 career victories are by decision. Looking at Nate Marquardt, 11-6 in the UFC. His last fight in his return to the middleweight division from fighting a couple times at welterweight, he defeated James T. Hunna at the Fight Night. Him and T. Hunna headlined back in New Zealand earlier this year, and 16 of his 33 career victories are by submission. Dave, I think this has a chance to kind of be a boring fight. I think at middleweight, I know he kind of blasted through T. Hunna, but I think he kind of took him through surprise. I don't see Marquardt being able to do that to Brad Tavares. Now, he could knock him out, but I don't think he's going to be able to catch him kind of off guard like that in the first minute, because Tavares has seen film on it. He kind of knows what's going to be a suspect. Now, Tavares is a pretty big middleweight. I think Marquardt will have maybe a tough time taking down. If it stays standing, it's pretty even. I would say Marquardt's maybe a little faster, but Tavares is a very solid kickboxer. Very good with his footwork and head movement, and he's also, like I said, tough. He not only, Marquardt maybe not the greatest wrestler, but Tavares does have pretty solid takedown defense. If it does go to the ground, Marquardt definitely has the advantage there, but I'm not sure if he can get it there. Right. So if it stays standing, Tavares, like I said, most of his wins by decision. He's not really a knockout guy. He kind of plots along, but if he's able to go in there early, land some leg kicks, establish his range, it's going to be hard for Marquardt to kind of get inside and land some of that potential power that he has in this division, because he's not cutting weight. He can kind of go loose and throw things at 100% power, without worrying about gas tanks. So it's somewhat intriguing, but I think it has the chance to kind of be the dud of the main card.
Yeah. Agree. It's kind of a weird fight. Like you said, it's just, this is the go to the bathroom, especially if you're at the movie theater. This is a good time to go and get some nachos, or see if you can go to the kitchen and make yourself something. But, I don't know. I think, Tavares is a little bit better. I think Marquardt 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 is a little bit better. I think Yeah, guys need fights, and this is one that they threw on the main card. I could definitely see it being thrown to the prelims, but hey, it could shock and awe us. I doubt it, but it could.
The co-main event of the evening in the lightweight division, Donald Cerrone against Miles Jury, the winner likely to get a title shot at the UFC lightweight championship. Looking at Cerrone, 12-3 in the UFC. His last fight was a victory over Eddie Alvarez at UFC 178, overall riding a 5-fight winning streak, and 15 of his 25 career victories are by submission. Looking at Miles Jury, 6-0 in the UFC, undefeated in his career at 15-0. His last fight was a victory over Takanori Gomi at the Hunt Nelson Fight Night, and 7 of his 15 career victories are by knockout. Very intriguing fight. Miles Jury, I guess, more known as a wrestler, but does have some knockout power. I think that was very apparent in his last fight against Takanori Gomi. But I think standing up, man, the Cowboy's tough. Those leg kicks, his range, his height, his movement, he's a very hard guy to deal with standing up, and I think he's just taken it to another level here in those last 5 fights that I mentioned on that 5-fight winning streak. And I think if you're Miles Jury, test the water, see how it's going, with your stand-up, but you got to be quick feet. You got to be moving in and out, and you got to be in his face. You can't allow the fight to kind of settle and get into a rhythm with you standing in front of him, because you're going to be kind of picked apart. Ask Eddie Alvarez that. That's kind of what Eddie did, was kind of stand in front of him, and he got leg kicked to death. Miles Jury cannot do that. He has to move around, and if he get in the clinch, get the fight to the ground, I know Cerrone's very dangerous with submissions, but sometimes he's too comfortable on his back, and that may allow you to land some ground and pound and may be able to win the fight that way. That's, to me, the areas Miles Jury has to try to exploit. But like I said, if he gets into a bad start, allows those leg kicks to build up, he's not going to be able to push for power strikes or push for power takedowns, and that will kind of lead to him happening basically what happened to Eddie Alvarez, kind of limping around and hoping to get a power punch. Very big test for Miles Jury, probably the best guy he's ever fought in his career, and if he can get by Cerrone, to me it's definitely plausible he can get a title shot. And Cerrone, he now wins 6 in a row, and if he can put away this young up-and-coming kid Miles Jury, I see no reason he can't get a crack at the title for the first time.
Yeah, I think movement is definitely the key for Miles Jury. He cannot stand in front of Cerrone. The movement is key so that he can't kick those legs that he's going to need for power punches. We've seen Cerrone in this spot before, and he was derailed super quick by Pettis in Chicago. He's on the cusp of a title shot. Yeah, Cerrone beats anybody and everybody, but when he gets right there at the title shot, the last time he was there, he got beat, and he got beat quickly. So, is it a pressure thing? Was it just Pettis was better thing? I don't know. But this is a time that Cerrone can definitely right the wrong of that fight, and this is also chance of a lifetime for Miles Jury. If he, like you said, whoever wins this fight has a definite argument that they should be the #1 contender.
The main event of the evening, Jon Jones against Daniel Cormier for the UFC Light Heavyweight Championship. And these two guys have some very impressive numbers, Dave. I'll read them off to you just in case you forgot how good they were, or listeners forgot how good these two gentlemen were. 14-1 is Jon Jones in the UFC, overall riding an 11-fight winning streak, including 7 straight title defenses. His last fight, he defeated Glover Teixeira at UFC 172, and of his 20 career victories, he has 9 by knockout. Daniel Cormier, 4-0 in the UFC, undefeated in his career, undefeated since dropping down to 205 pounds at 2-0. His last fight, he dominated Dan Henderson at UFC 173, and 6 of his 15 career victories are by knockout, and he is 15-0 in his career. We are arguably getting, on paper, Dave, in terms of wins and losses, 2 of the best fighters to ever step foot in the UFC. I mean, you have 15-0. I know technically he's 20-1, but that might as well be 21-0. Very rarely have you seen in the UFC guys this deep into their career, 10 fights plus, basically be undefeated and squaring off against each other. You don't see it happen too often. And not only are we seeing it, Dave, we're seeing it be for a UFC title. This is rather awesome. And we get to see, I know Jon Jones, he's the young guy, he's 27, and we got Cormier, a little older at 34, but because of he hasn't had that many fights, Cormier is still fresh, not a lot of fight mileage on him. So we're seeing these two pretty much at the primes of their careers, more or less, maybe a little past for Cormier, but more or less the primes of their fighting careers, and we get to see it fight for the title. This should be excellent. I mean, striking-wise, obviously Jon Jones has that incredible reach. He has the kicks. He has the flashy, crazy spinning back elbows and all that stuff. Standing up, he has the advantage. Cormier has more power, dropping down from heavyweight. I mean, he knocked out Bigfoot Silva, for gosh sake. So, I mean, he definitely has power. That's apparent. The area we're interested to see is the wrestling. Jones, with his height, reach, and leverage, and obviously his own wrestling ability, very tough to take down. But he's never taken a guy that was Olympic caliber wrestler. And we're taking a guy that, he's going to be a little shorter, a little stockier, but to me should be more powerful. So that's the X factor to me, is if Cormier can close the distance, get inside for the takedown, can he take down Jon Jones, something that hasn't happened before? And if he can take down Jon Jones, I think he can be very successful. If he can't, I think he's going to be picked apart because Jon Jones will be able to strike from the outside with ease. And that's what makes this fight, I think, so intriguing.
That's for your breakdown and because I'm excited for the fight. You could almost say that I'm... Anyway, no, your breakdown, I don't think anybody else can break it down any better. I think if anybody tries to break down this fight any different than the way that you did and that I've been saying since they booked it, I think that they're reaching. If Jones can keep Cormier at range, Jones wins this fight easily. If Cormier can get inside of the range, make it a dirty fight, wrestle, get him to the ground, pick him up and slam him like he's done to everybody, then I think it's Cormier's fight to win. I mean, if you try to break down the technical punching or anything at Jones, I think you're wrong. It's one of those two things, whichever one's going to happen. If Cormier can get through those punches and get on the inside, I think it's a cakewalk for him, to be completely honest. And if he can't, I think Jones destroys him. It's that simple, man.
All right, Dave. With that said, let's get to some picks. First fight of the evening, welterweight division.
Let's wait
before we... up?
Hold on. Oh. Darn it. Hold on.
Yeah, so you got to have this pre-queued.
I'm sorry. It's an advertisement. Gosh. For Lord of the Rings on Google Play.
Oh, boy.
All right, here we go. Picks.
But he's not fighting.
That's all right.
All right. Hector Lombard against Josh Berkman, welterweight division. I like Josh Berkman, like him back at the UFC, amidst what he says throwing a fight, but give me a lightning Lombard in this one.
Yeah, I'm going to take Lombard as well in this fight.
Horiguchi versus Godno. I'm on the Horiguchi bandwagon, man, so no chance of picking Luis in this one, so give me the man from Japan.
I'll take the flying Japanese sensation. I said flying because flyweight. See that?
I see what you did there.
All right.
Middleweight fight of the evening here. Brad Tavares, Nate Marquardt. I don't know. I'll take Nate Marquardt, sure.
I'll take Brad Tavares, okay?
All right, good. We covered our bases. All right, co-main event of the evening, Miles Jury against Donald Cerrone. I really want to pick Miles Jury. He's a hometown guy. He grew up just half hour over from me here in Michigan from Hazel Park. But, man, the Cowboys on such a roll right now, and it's just hard to go against them. I'm going to be rooting for Miles, but I'm picking Donald Cerrone.
Yeah, I'm going with Cowboy in this one.
Jones, Cormier, main event, UFC light heavyweight title. Someone might die. No, I'm kidding. But they just want to kill each other. That's apparent. But, man, I'm picking Jon Jones because he hasn't lost. Until someone can beat him, it's hard to pick against him. So I'm picking Jon Jones, but kind of like the co-main event, I kind of will be rooting for Daniel Cormier. I would like to see someone beat Jon Jones. Actually beat Jon Jones. So I'm going with John, but I'll be rooting for Mr. DC.
Yeah, I'm gonna do the same thing. It is always nice to see. No, you know what? I'm gonna go with Cormier. And it's gonna kind of lead to a question. I know we don't normally do questions after breakdowns, but or after picks, but I have to ask this. I'm assuming the last two fights that you've watched, you've seen this promo that they've aired, this long-winded promo for this fight. Jones is saying that the UFC is making him out into a bad light. What do you think about this whole promo?
Here's the thing. The footage of them pushing each other probably shouldn't have been used. But them using the footage of that Sports Center thing, to me, is fair game.
Right.
Now, did he think he was off air? Sure. Are there things you and I say off air? Absolutely. Knowing when you're off air and on air is a big deal.
Yeah.
So, to me, those comments are fair game, and he said those things. He's making himself out to look in a bad light, and a lot of people, he's already kind of put himself in a bad light. A lot of people don't like him already. So, to me, it doesn't really hurt his image any more than it already has. So, I don't know. At this point, John Jones to stop trying to be a good guy and just embrace the fact that people don't like him and just play the villain.
I agree. When we watch a video of you saying something, it's hard for us not to believe it was you. Sure, we can play the game that, Jim Graham stole your cell phone and tweeted out, terrible things. But when you said it, it's hard for me to not believe that, that you said it, basically. But this is why people are picking against him, because he comes off as a guy that you want to see get his face smashed.
You're right. I'm not saying that he's not a good guy. I'm just saying that he's done things. He's like trying to be a good guy, but it just doesn't work out for him. Whatever he does, the public does not seem to respond to it. So he should just stop. Not saying it's an act, him being good. I'm just saying he should just kind of drop the facade and just go like Josh Koscheck, Michael Bisping on these guys and just play up being a villain. It's not to say just because you play a villain in your kind of job, like Chael Sonnen did that perfectly. He played up the villain. That's what he did. It's not to say Chael's not a nice guy. If you walk up to him, he's not like, "Oh, nice to meet you." Like, he's not going to do that, but he's got to play that up. It brings some bravado to him. This is the fight business. No one's going to look at you different if you kind of played it up a little bit.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, anything else to add here, Dave, before we end the show?
Nope. Tune in Sunday for the award show.
That is December 28th. We're still working on a time, but it will happen the 28th.
Tune in.
Somewhere on that day, it will happen, and we're going to give our awards, and we'll try to announce, hopefully, definitely after Christmas, what our contest is going to be. Hopefully we can get it by Friday or Saturday, give you a chance, guys, to join or vote. So it's going to be something in conjunction with the awards. Hopefully, if not, we're going to do a contest. Something will happen with a contest. We're going to give away some signed photos. So yes, so tune to the end of their show. And once again, he is the Juice Dave Sadler. You can follow him on Twitter at VigilanteJuice. I'm your host, Jim Graham. Follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham. And thank you for listening to another edition of the Beyond the Cage podcast presented by Fight Chicks.